Okay, so what is the initial product or service development process? Well, this is more than, say, in the product realm, simply manufacturing your good or arranging for manufacturing of your good, or with services, hiring people who have the qualifications or licenses to carry out your service. It generally involves the process behind how you go from concept to viable product and the launch of that product or service into your intended customer market. So generally, there's steps in there, and there's different stages that are commonly accepted that you'll hear in common parlance when people are breaking down strategies or techniques at each stage to maximize benefits or efficiency. So you're always going to have your initial research, as we talked about with market research, and then your initial development phase, which with products may be the testing of a specific attribute or feature of a product, the machining of it, etc., versus service. You're designing the system by which you'll carry out that service, or the initial procedures that you'll use in carrying out that service, or your strategic concept behind say, a information or idea-based business. Then you're going to have the alpha test, which is the early testing of that idea, product, or service to determine how it's received. And generally that's internal testing with a control group that is somehow closely related to the business venture. So when you hear alpha testing, it's generally that internal level of testing that before it's put outside to third parties who have little or no relation to the business. You'll do a strategic assessment early on from there to determine how it was received, what aspects you should change, to try and basically get down to the minimum viable product or service that you should release initially to your target customer segment or segments. Because by and large, any product can have any number of features that go beyond what its minimum core quality or core value proposition is. And even more so with services, you can do so much more than is the base value proposition that you deliver to customers. So your strategic assessment helps you get back there. And there's a continuous feedback loop always in place from any level of market feedback, either through alpha test, later beta test, or your launch and continued business, that helps you use that information to better refine your product, service, or idea to better meet the value proposition that is expected by your target customer or client or end user. So after the alpha test and your feedback loop that's in place there, you have the beta test, which is an introduction of the product, service, or idea to a controlled third-party group that's outside of the immediately held business. So you'll basically have disinterested third parties to use, test your product or service and give you feedback on it, and you can use that feedback to again further refine your product or service down to minimum viable product or the strategic orientation that it needs to have a successful launch into the public. And then you have the launch phase where you actually make your product, service, or idea available to the public at large, and the feedback that you receive at that phase. Again, there's always a feedback loop there where you're employing the information or feedback you get to make the product better. And throughout each phase, all the way through launch and continue on, there's always a research and development component, always making changes, always refining or improving the process, the system, or the physical product.